Is that all right? Oh, so nobody else is coming after me. So I'm not going to get the Conscious Life Expo hit squad that comes and literally drags me off the stage with prejudice. Not you, of course. It's all, bureaucracy is about deferring blame, so it's like underlings that get to do it, right?
Exactly. So now it'll be up to the AV people.
All right. Well, I'm not going to like torture anybody, but
All right.
we have some really cool stuff to talk about, and I guess let's just have a show of hands of who was not here for the other one. And how's that possible? Y'all just raised all your hands and said you were here. Who's lying to me? Okay, so who was here? Okay, and who was not here? Okay, so it's 50-50. Well, interesting. So, this is kind of an aside, but I got a ticket on the way here. And I said to the guy, look, I really don't want to get mad at you, you know, it's all good, and I understand you're just doing your job, and it's all about the love. And then I'm like thinking, my God, I really need to get to this conference, and the traffic is much worse than I thought it was going to be, and I'm late. And I'm like, you know what? I don't have time for this. I'm getting back in the car, whatever, you know. And as I get back in the car, I totally ripped my pants all the way down. So that's like the instant karma, right? And it's just spontaneous. So we had this whole plan worked out that I'm gonna like wear this when I'm doing the meet and greets at the end. So as to be not too ostentatious. But I don't do free balling. I actually do have boxer shorts on. So. These kind of pants that wouldn't really, you know, be like, I don't know. So just to let you know that I'm a human being, and part of why I left late in the first place is that I do have a cough. It's a virus, and so my webmaster, Larry, I called him up and I said, man, I got a virus. He's like, oh my God, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'll get through it. He's like, well, how long has it been going on? I'm like, a couple of days. He's like, my God, are you going to be able to get your data? Are you going to be able to... And I'm like, dude, no, body virus. Forget the computer. Like, I see where your mind is at, you know? We are going to go through some of the material that those of you who did see the other talk are going to be familiar with. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I see all of this talk as a big whole. It's a conglomerate of this information that's going to start by giving you some very compelling evidence about what we're heading into as a planet and what really is happening here. Despite the challenges that we face on this planet and the difficulties that we're going through and the seeming chaos of what's going on, I have consistently argued that this is actually a positive event. And if you are filming, that's, yeah.
I was just filming your shadow, is that all right?
No,
Okay.
sorry. We don't want this leaking on the internet, so anything I can do to stop that from happening is good. This is privilege protected content. It's stuff that, you know, I can't create an entirely new talk every single time I go somewhere, so we don't want this to start making the rounds. So, I want to talk about the gods, and this is, again, some stuff that you will have seen before. I want to mention to you the fact that extraterrestrials are not what you've been led to believe. The media has brainwashed you into thinking that there's all kinds of strange creatures and that they're threatening and terrifying, and there's something wrong if we have, you know, contact, and it's going to be fearful, it's going to be dangerous, it's going to be scary. I do not believe that's what is going on here. I believe that all of us are being led through a spiritual awakening. And the purpose of that awakening is ultimately nothing less than the transmutation of what it means to be human. And I totally understand why you would want to film this, and I'm sorry that I called you out. It's not a big deal, but I just...
We'll talk later.
Yeah. So, when we go around from culture to culture, we see human beings. Everybody's like, oh, reptilian Anunnaki. Well, look at the Sumerian cylinder seals. It's a human. It's a human face. That's Inanna. We see in this case, these humans are twice as tall as everybody else. And I believe, based on all the circumstantial evidence that I've heard from insiders, that this would represent a Stargate, which is how these guys were getting in here. This, of course, would be the Anunnaki who, according to Zechariah Sitchin, interbred with us and actually gave us the upgrade from the primal level that we were at before. You guys could give me a little more gain on my mic. I don't want to strain my voice, and I can actually, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. So, great, awesome. So when we look at these guys, we don't see reptilians, we don't see scary creatures, we're seeing humans with beards, and this looks like wristwatches, but this is supposed to be from 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. And they'll say, what the heck is that doing on his wrist? Because do you really think that with the technology that they were supposedly having back during the Sumerian times, where they're allegedly, the only way they can write is by carving onto cuneiform with these little styluses, pieces of clay, that was it? Doesn't look like they have the technology to do that, but there it is. Now, we go to Egypt, and again, you see some gods with a hawk head like Horus, but then you see others that have distinctly human faces. And here at Abydos, they're given towering size. This was an interesting one. This is from an actual Egyptian painting. Some of them are still in color. And I want you to notice the color of his skin, and in particular, when compared to the others that he's drawn with. This, again, indicates a human extraterrestrial who was one of the gods who came here and was helping the Egyptians in some way. There's a very distinctive difference there. And of course, Osiris is responsible for the Osirian, which is made of these massive, massive stone blocks that realistically, if we had the technology to do this now, then why the heck haven't we? Skeptics can say, oh, well, you know, we could do that. Then why don't we? Why is it that everybody all over the world was doing this? So again, I also want to point out the shape of the head here, because this is pretty weird. I mean, look at all this extra room in his hat. And you might not think that means anything, but then as we keep looking at other examples, we see Akhenaten, and there's some side views that I didn't have time to locate, but he has a very large head, and you can kind of see it here. This hat obviously has the room for all that extra mass in it. And here's a bust of Nefertiti, and you notice the enormous, I mean, just you can tell by the angle on the back, if it was just her head, it doesn't make sense why it would wrap around. Especially here, you can see the contour of the skull. But that's not all. Look at this. Now that looks like it's just her own skull with maybe a little bit of a cap pulled over it or something, but certainly not, there'd be no reason to wear a hat like that. So this is very interesting. It suggests that these people, this is Akhenaten Nefertiti's daughter, these people were not earthborn human, but they still have mostly human characteristics. And you can even see, this is a bust that somebody posed for. This is a bust that doesn't show any indication of a hat on. It's just a huge skull. And here's another drawing of them sitting there, which obviously is a little stylized. The eyes are much too large. But look at this, the shape of the head is all very consistent. And even King Tut, who we're not used to thinking about as being potentially extraterrestrial blood, has this weird head when his head is sculpted. When we go over to the Hindu tradition, we see a blue-skinned human god. The four arms, I think, is probably just a representation of his aura or something. I don't think they literally have all these extra arms. But they always are depicted as flying on a lotus. And here we see, in a classic illustration, the size difference between him and a conventional human. Again, like the Anunnaki, twice as tall, clear differentiation in the skin color, and you have your floating lotus once again, which could very well be some sort of powered craft. And this is one of the most ancient drawings that is available, showing the powered craft, and in this case, with all the faces, as I said the other night, we've heard from some insiders that there are certain ETs that wherever you stand when you're looking at them, you see their face aimed at you. It doesn't matter which location you're at, it's always going to be looking at you, and it's because it's an energy being and it can project its face towards you because that's what it knows you want to see. So it can holographically batch process an entire room and get everybody 360 degrees around, which then became mythologized as this, and you see this kind of thing in many, many different cultures. We go over into the Norse mythology, and again, the gods are human, but Odin and then his son Thor. Thor had Thor's hammer, which clearly seems to be some sort of technological device that shoots thunderbolts and actually causes a great deal of damage. So you can see he's human. In Ireland, we have a huge amount of legends about gods, and they do some weird stuff. They have advanced technology, particle beam weapons. They have, one guy gets his arm chopped off, and then they replace it with an arm that's made out of metal. Now, if this is 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, you know, and they're describing the arm as being fully functional. This clearly, again, sounds like we're dealing with advanced technology, and they're drawn as human. Again, the Celtics, same thing. Celtic gods are always drawn human. Here's another one, Mercury, which then got into Greece. When we go over to the Mayas, we have the blonde-haired, blue-eyed god. As we were laughing on the panel the other day, if you were there, the George Norrie Canyon was like, hey, that's us. So, but pay attention to this right for now. I mean, yes, he's shaped like the pineal gland. We're going to get to that. And there's pine cones all around his necklace here. But the face is totally human. And he appears to have a space helmet on, which is also shaped like the mouth of the serpent. The time in Mayan symbology when human spirit aligns with the center of the galaxy is 2012, according to John Major Jenkins, corresponding to our conjunction with the mouth of the serpent. So this actually is an illustration of the return of the gods in 2012, potentially. That's one interpretation of it, and we'll get to that. Then when we go around the same area outside the Maya, we get Viracocha. And I want you to pay close attention to how the eyes are being depicted here. Even in this one, they're definitely larger than a normal person, but then here, and these appear to be older. You notice the state of degradation of this statue is not as much, whereas this one looks really old. This one obviously looks old too. So the oldest ones here have these weird eyes, and maybe they made it more anthropomorphic, more like us here. But remember, this is Mesoamerica, and then we go over north, and the Hopi have the Kachina, or Kachana, different ways to pronounce it. This could possibly be a mustache, don't really know. He definitely has some greasy lamb chop sideburns, like Elvis. But notice the eyes, again, they're wide set on the head. They don't look like regular human eyes, and again, this could be just stylized. But then when we go over to Japan, you see a remarkably similar phenomenon with the Dogu. The shape of the mouth, first of all, is the same. Notice that, okay? Notice that the eyes are wide set on the head, once again. And no, just because I'm using my fingers like this doesn't mean I'm giving you Lucifer symbol or something. This is why we don't want videos on the internet. I don't think it happens. So, the eyes are wide set on the head, just like we see here, and just like we see here. They're larger than usual, okay? And the Dogu in Japanese tradition came from Anemonu Tonobune, which means flying boats from the universe. And they were the gods. What do you think that means? Obviously. As time goes on, I think they mythologized what they originally saw more and more as people remembered them, but then they didn't come back. And they get wider because, remember, extra weight back then was considered a real good thing, sign of great health. So then this guy just keeps on gaining and gaining as time goes on. He's like, really needs to get on Weight Watchers by now. But I mean, this is very compelling. Look at the shape of the eyes. Is it possible that they're drawing something that they really saw? We don't know. But it's very interesting because it's still humanoid, but different. And I propose, actually, that this is an intermediate stage between where we started from here and then where we get to here. I think the eyes were larger, and that became more and more like a myth, like a telephone game over time. When we go to Africa, we have the Dogon. And remember, the name here is the Dogu. very, very similar name. That might have been what they called themselves, and people pronounce it slightly differently. Notice how tall he is. There's a clear indication of towering size in the way this was sculpted. But what you really can't see until we zoom in is the eyes. Look at the shape. Here's the nose, here's the mouth. And the mouth is a little odd too. There's almost a suggestion of a helmet here. That could be a beard. But look at the distance between the bottom of the eye and the top of this helmet or whatever the heck it is. And the size of the eye is huge. I mean, that's much bigger than like, see, if I do it this way, then nobody's going to get upset. Maybe I'm going to do that instead of that. Size of the eye compared to the nose, it's huge. So there's something really interesting about all this stuff. And then, of course, we go to Australia, we look at these cave paintings and we see Wandjina. Now these look very familiar. And so there's different types of humans that seem to be coming here. And they have larger eyes, and they keep showing up. People draw pictures of them, and they make statues of them. This looks an awful lot like our Dogu, except it's on a completely different continent. So look, the government's known about this for a long, long time. Don't think for a minute that anybody's overlooked this stuff. It's just a question of the media not discussing this. Because what I've just showed you is very different than what you're getting in the movies. What I've just showed you, even when we go into Greek mythology, the Greek gods, like Zeus, they're portrayed as human. They're not portrayed as ETs. They don't have weird faces. They basically look like you and me. And this looks very much like somebody who posed for a picture. Now, I don't think he really had horns. I think that's maybe a hat that he was wearing or something like that. But we see that these guys seem to have been showing up all over the place, all over the world. And if we go into the archaeological record, there's plenty of evidence to support that non-terrestrial humans did visit the planet, they died, and they left remains behind. And those remains have been located, and sure enough, they don't look like anything we're supposed to have on this planet. And Discover Magazine, to their credit, has made a bold leap forward in disclosure by discussing the Boskop skulls, which come from a small area in South Africa, 1913. Two farmers dug it up. Noticed there was something really weird about these bones. So, this is not the only Boskop skull that's been found. There were several skulls like this that were found in that area and in other areas. There's a series of weird skulls like this that have been found. It looks pretty okay. If you don't really spend a whole lot of time looking at it, you're not going to notice very much. But here's the actual bones that are in there in the record. And of course, the shape of these bones doesn't leave anything to the imagination. We can really realistically reconstruct this skull based on what we have here, the mandible, and everything. So just the ratio between the mandible and the rest of the cranium is enormous compared to a regular human skull. This is not like you're hunting around in the dark archaeologically. This is actual forensic reconstruction, just like they do if you had a body that hardly had anything left. And we're dealing with a brain capacity that's almost double what our own brain is. And these guys were given preferential treatment in their burials. When you dig them up, they're actually surrounded by flowers and religious offerings and all this stuff that suggests they were highly revered spiritual leaders. And again, the Egyptians appear to have drawn pictures of these folks who also didn't just visit Egypt, they were interested in Mesoamerica too. So when you go over to Peru, and we're going to see some really cool architecture from Peru, you get the same exact guys, except here we don't have any absolutely undeniable lifelike drawings of them, but we have their skulls. These skulls have been found in Peru, and somebody was just telling me at the last event that there's a Rosicrucian museum from AMORC up there in San Francisco, and that they actually have some of these skulls on display. You can go look at them. So clearly, much larger than the human skull should be. And again,